Good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us once again. This is the second of three sessions from our Phase 2 webinar series, Keeping Our Communities and Families Safe. The third and final session is scheduled for Tuesday, 20th July. If you're interested in viewing previous sessions, inclusive of those from Series 1, they are available on our YouTube platform at NCPP TNT. I am Betsy Ann Moses, the Corporate Communications Officer for the National Crime Prevention Program. The National Crime Prevention Program is designed to engage, educate, and empower persons to work with each other in order to achieve safer communities, safer and more resilient communities, as well as an enhanced quality of life. Education and empowerment are integral factors in creating a culture of crime prevention. For today's webinar session, we will be continuing the discussion on drug use. On Tuesday, the conversation evolved around drug use and prevention. Moving forward, our presenters will share information on drug use and misuse from a policy perspective. These speakers will also share with you the different types of new drugs and its effects. To engage and edify you on this topic, we are privileged to have with us Ms. Esther Bess and Ms. Michelle Nasir. Ms. Esther Bess is the manager of the National Drug Council Secretariat under the Ministry of National Security for over 19 years, a unit which she has led since its inception. She's a former member of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana and holds a master's degree in social work. Ms. Bess also has a series of specialized training certificates in leadership, planning, drug policy, and other areas. As manager of the Drug Council, Ms. Bess represented the Ministry of National Security and by extension Trinidad and Tobago locally, regionally, and internationally by facilitating meetings, conferences, seminars, and training workshops. Our next speaker, Ms. Michelle Nasir, is the Acting Director at the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center, also under the Ministry of National Security. Ms. Nasir has been in this position for the past 10 years and has been in the toxicology section for 17 years, where she analyzed drugs, alcohol, poisons in biological specimens, and crime scene evidence. She has a wealth of knowledge and experience in this field. She is the holder of a Bachelor's of Science and Master's degree in Chemistry and Analytical Chemistry. She also earned certificates in the analysis of drugs, in biological specimens and substance abuse prevention, policy, and forensic toxicology. The goal of these presenters today is to ensure that every citizen becomes knowledgeable about the risk associated with the trending use and misuse of drugs in all its forms. You are encouraged right now to invite someone to tune in and receive this vital and possibly life-saving information. If you have any questions, we encourage you to post them during the session. Time permitting, at the end of the presentation, we will answer most of them. Education and awareness on drug use and misuse is key. Stay tuned with us and let's work together to create a culture of crime prevention. We cannot do it alone, but we can do it together. I now hand you over to our presenters, Ms. Esther Bess and Ms. Michelle Nasir.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Crime Prevention Program webinar. My name is Esther Best. I'm the manager of the National Drug Council.
And I am Michelle Nasir, Deputy Director at the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center.
And thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the policy initiatives and then look at some of the emerging drugs in Trinidad and Tobago. So let me just tell you a little bit about the National Drug Council. The National Drug Council was established by Cabinet in 2000 in the Ministry of National Security, with the Secretariat being established in 2001. The Council is made up of the highest level of decision makers in the key areas of the anti-drug initiative. And so we have representatives from security management and law enforcement, foreign affairs, legal and criminal justice, demand reduction, which includes both government and civil society, anti-money laundering, the Tobago House of Assembly, the business community, and the Ministry of Social Development. And the council is chaired by an independent person who is not aligned to any of the agencies that are around the table or any agencies connected to drug control issues. Our primary mandate is to monitor and evaluate the progress made during the implementation of national anti-drug plans of Trinidad and Tobago relative to both demand and supply, and to make appropriate recommendations. And that means that we advise the government and the responsible agencies on the areas of drug control. So Trinidad and Tobago has had a series of national plans. Our most recent was 2014 with the policy and plan for the period 2014-2018. And those plans were in 6 focal areas: institutional strengthening and international cooperation, demand reduction, supply reduction, research, control measures, and then monitoring and evaluation. We now have a new plan for the period 2020 to 2024 and a new policy document for 2020 that has been drafted and submitted to the Cabinet for approval. And we are focused on 5 areas in this new plan: institutional strengthening and international cooperation, again, demand reduction, supply research, control measures. And we have left the monitoring and evaluation to an independent agency within the Ministry of National Security. So it's not built into this plan in the same way as it was in the others. So let's just look at policy for a minute. Why is policy important? So I looked at Wikipedia and got this definition, which I thought was kind of interesting because it talks about translating political vision into programs and actions to deliver outcomes that are desired changes in the real world. And I really like the reference to the real world, because the reality is that we are in an ever-changing environment. And so we need to be able to adapt our policies to make them relevant. And that is why it goes on to make further reference to evidence-based policy that is based on scientific evidence, instead of just going with history and culture. So, but history and culture does have an important role to play, because your policy must be relevant to the persons and to the society in which it is functioning. And so consequently, when we make public policy, we must be able to have it informed by evidence. It must be relevant to the current and evolving situation, and it must also be relevant to those persons and target groups to whom it is intended. So the Council has the Drug Information Network of Trinidad and Tobago, which is our data collection component of the work that we do, to collect data to inform our policies. And policies are only as good as the programs and projects that they inform. And so if you have poor policy, then your programs and your projects are not going to have the impact that you wanted to have, and therefore the outcomes for those desired changes would be minimized. Okay, so we want to have strong policy. But we're doing this against a background of the National Crime Prevention Program. So I wanted to look at the relevance of some of our policy initiatives to the work of the NCPP. So let's talk about decriminalization of marijuana. You know, everybody was real excited about that. I remember listening to the radio, Misha, I don't know if you remember that, and this guy called in and said, the Chief Justice had made a statement about the decriminalization of marijuana, and this guy called in and he said, big up the Chief Justice, man, boom, 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 because the Chief Justice talked about the decriminalization of marijuana. When it finally came to fruition in 2019, when there was no criminal charge that's going to be attached with possession of 30 grams or less, and the law now says that there are 4 plants per adult that can be grown. And what does this really mean in terms of the work of the NCPP? Actually, when we look at the data over the years, there's an average of about 3,000 arrests per year just for the possession of drugs. So if you now allow persons to have 30 grams in their possession, it means that we should now see a consequent decrease in the number of arrests per year. What does that do? It means that there are less people who will have a criminal charge against them, less persons who are likely to suffer the stigmatization of having that arrest, less persons who are barred from certain kinds of jobs because they have a criminal, they have law breaking in their background. And then it also it has the knock-on effect of putting less persons into jail. So that with this move to decriminalize marijuana has that kind of knock-on effect. What does that do for NCPP? It gives NCPP more opportunities to work in the community with a wider cross-section of persons who now do not have a criminal justice issue in their background. What is the downside to this? The downside to this is that those persons who are chronic users may not get the help they need. And I'm sure some of you may have heard about the drug treatment court. Many of the persons who present in the drug treatment court are persons who have more often than not, they're charged with possession of marijuana, right?
Yes.
And so it means now that there are less persons who may benefit from the services of the drug treatment court. But I am encouraged because NCPP is in the communities, and therefore they have the opportunity to partner with agencies like us, like NADAP, like the Forensic Science Center, to bring programs to these persons and to help them to redirect and change their behavior. The second thing, the second big change in the legislation was to include ecstasy as a drug, a dangerous drug, and a drug that would now attract a charge. Prior to that, it did not attract consequence. It was not included in the list of dangerous drugs. And we gathered this information on ecstasy from our early warning system. We have a project that is an early warning system that's supposed to key us into what is happening in the environment with new drugs, with new ways of using drugs and different things that that can happen in that arena. And we now have persons who've been charged with the possession of these drugs. I think you're going to talk some more about that, so I'm going to leave that to her. But I want to go back to what is the relevance of this to NCPP. We have heard anecdotally, and we have seen some of the flyers that talks about sales in the communities and building up this market for these pills by having pill parties. So one of the flyers we saw late last year said free pills before 11. You know how you used to go to the club and you have free drinks before 11? It's free pills before 11. And that is the way of building the market for the use of these pills. Again, create that demand. Again, NCPP has the opportunity to get in there and do that prevention with national crime prevention. We're not trying to close the stable after the horse has bolted. We try to get prevention in there. So by doing this, by us taking these policy decisions, we could easily partner with NCPP to bring more effective prevention messages into the community to allow for increased education. And this is why we welcome this opportunity today to bring some increased education. Let's talk some more about what more additional relevance there is. All of the pictures you are seeing on the screen were advertised on the internet during the COVID-19 period. Because of course, people weren't free to move around to get what they needed. So there were opportunities now for you to order online and probably just pick up or have it delivered to you. And I want you to pay special attention to what is being offered. All of what you're seeing here are cannabis infused products with high levels of THC. So I don't know, it's not, so the light isn't working. But up in the corner, those are actually Rice Krispie treats. And on Tuesday, when Mrs. Hollingsworth was here with Mr. Sinclair, she talked about the fact that this was concerning to her because Rice Krispie treats are usually geared to children. You put all these pretty colors in them, and what do you now have? You have a treat that is attractive to a child. And God forbid that a parent has it, leaves it in the refrigerator, and the child goes into the refrigerator and consumes it. So we want to really sound that note of caution around these edibles. But these are all things that were available during the COVID period. Lots of strong advertising. The use of the internet just exploded with these items. So what you're also seeing are brownies with M&Ms in them, all marijuana, all cannabis infused. The cannabis oil that is being used. That if I don't know if you can see down at the bottom where it says 560 milligrams of THC, and Michelle will speak to that in a bit in terms of how that will impact you. But look at the lollipops. Are they not very attractive? Perfectly formed marijuana leaf on it and everything. So you're no doubt as to what you are getting when you get these lollipops. And then the ice cream is infused. It is ice cream, yes. It's ice cream infused with cannabis and further complemented with a cannabis infused brownie. So can you begin to imagine the type of high that comes from that? And then you put it with the sugar as another factor that is contributing to it. So in all of this, what we're saying to you is there are quite a bit of things out there where we need to increase the awareness of the public as to what is being offered. Parents in particular need to be aware, because a lot of young people are into the edibles. They see it as less harmful than the smoking and some of the other things. But again, sounding a note of caution, edibles, when you first consume it, you do not feel the high immediately like you would feel if you smoked a joint or so. What does this then mean? You tend to consume even more. And as you consume more, your body is now metabolizing and digesting and everything. And then it starts to feel, you start to get the effect of the high coming on, and it's usually a very intense high by that time because you have consumed so much of it. And the levels of THC in some of these edibles are extremely high. So we really want to sound a note of caution to the public, and again, collaborating with NCPP, we can do a greater protection of the general public through the sharing of this information. Now, a lot of times you hear us talk about money laundering, and you're like, well, what does that have to do with me? You know, money laundering don't really have nothing to do with me. That's for them big boys and this and that. And how does it affect my day-to-day life? This is how it affects your day-to-day life. So government policy was to change the $100 bill because they recognized that there were high levels of money laundering and that people were hoarding cash in that process. And so in changing a simple act like changing the $100 bill, many of you would remember that you were hunting all over your home looking for whatever old $100 bills you had, so you could go and change them before the deadline date had passed. And up to 2 weeks ago, a friend called me to say, is there anything that can be done? Because one of her colleagues found an envelope with $3,000 in it with all the $100 bills and was wondering if it could still be changed. I was not aware of whether the central bank had extended the time because of the COVID, so I just advised her to go to the central bank and see what was happening. But these are real life examples of how these things affect us on a day-to-day basis. And with money laundering, there are international monitoring agencies that have the potential to tell us, no, you cannot do trade because of high money laundering in your country. How does this roll down to you? It means that you can't use your credit card or you can't use your ATM card. I know we all live with our ATM cards. You cannot use your ATM card because we do not have the privileges of the corresponding banks and all of the international organizations that manage these systems. So we have to understand that these things and these terms have real relevance for us. And so in bringing this information on policy to you, we are hoping that you will understand that it's not something that happens somewhere up there and it isn't real and you're not feeling the impact on it. It is very real, it is very relevant, and it is relevant to you on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that we really want to sound a note of caution about as well is this whole concept of what constitutes medicinal marijuana or medicinal marijuana. So we want to add some clarity because there is legislation that will come on medicinal marijuana that would say to you, it is those CBD products that should not have more than 0.02% THC. And I know that when Mrs. Hollingsworth was here on Tuesday, she talked about the fact that THC is the psychoactive component of the cannabis plant. And that is where you get your high. So that we should not get fooled. And I want the public to understand that when you go to the drugstores and you see these CBD products on sale, please just double check to see what is the THC component in those products. So we've talked a little bit about the money, we've talked about the edibles and so. And I just want to go into some of the other special projects that have been undertaken in collaboration with our other stakeholders to reach different groups across all of the areas of drug control. So I spoke already about the Drug Information Network of Trinidad and Tobago, which is where we collect our data. And I am very happy to say that the Forensic Science Center is a contributor to the Drug Information Network of Trinidad and Tobago, as are a number of other agencies like the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the UWI is on board with the Drug Information Network, the civil society organizations, the Ministry of Health. We have a number of organizations that contribute. The Women's Institute for Alternative Development, WINAD, has done some research with us in East Port of Spain, looking at the role of women in crime and the role of women in substance use and the the distribution of drugs as well. That is one of the research studies that we had done. We also did a prison research study. We did a marijuana study back in 2014 as we saw the direction that the world was going in with decriminalization and to some extent legalization, because I think Uruguay was the first country to legalize marijuana. It was around 2014, 2015 they did it. And so so we did some work on marijuana to look at what was happening in Trinidad and Tobago. How did people feel about having marijuana decriminalized, legalized, and those kinds of things. We had the Counter Drug Intelligence Training School, which is where we deliver quite a bit of training locally and regionally, mainly on supply reduction initiatives. The Adolescent Treatment Program is a training program that was actually initiated by Trinidad and Tobago and taken up by OAS-CCAD, taken up and developed by OAS-CCAD. And Michelle, I don't know if you remember, but it was a discussion we were having when we were doing the Adolescent Drug Treatment Code, when we were developing the policy document for the Adolescent Drug Treatment Code. Yeah. And we started to look at what treatment services were available for adolescents, yes. And were people actually trained in delivering that treatment for adolescents. Correct, yeah. And it was based on that, and we recognized that there was a gap in services there, okay. That we reached out to OAS-CCAD to ask them to develop this specialized program that would look at treatment options for adolescents. And that program was picked up and has now been delivered worldwide. Started in the Caribbean, piloted in the Caribbean, and delivered worldwide, and is now being developed actually by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime as a program with for international certification. So we've had a number of persons trained in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean in this area, but also in a number of other countries as well. We are about to embark on a national consumption study, which is essentially a household survey to look at what is being consumed, how it is being consumed, and the levels of consumption. The multilateral evaluation mechanism is the hemispheric mechanism for looking at drug control and how countries are treating with drug control in their respective countries, based on a standardized questionnaire used again by OAS-CCAT. Gender equality in drug law enforcement agencies, looking at how gender issues are being treated in drug law enforcement agencies, and whether there is room for women at the top. Trinidad and Tobago has a sterling reputation in this area. As a matter of fact, we had the first woman to head a drug unit in a police service in the English-speaking Caribbean, in the person of then Senior Superintendent Kathleen Weeks, who ultimately retired as an ACP, but she was the first woman to head a drug unit in the English-speaking, in a police service in the English-speaking Caribbean. We've worked collaboratively with a number of organizations, COPOLAD being one, and this is the Cooperation Program on Drug Policy. And they've worked in a number of different areas on quality standards. I mentioned the early warning system, precursor chemical control, the cocaine route, alternatives to incarceration, and a number of different areas. We've had assistance from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and specifically, I know that Michelle will speak about the handheld devices that were donated to Trinidad and Tobago and other countries in the Caribbean to help with the field detection of drugs. We've had visits from the International Narcotics Control Board. The most recent was in September 2019, and they come to look to see how we are doing in managing our drug control area. And then we've hosted numerous workshops over the years, training persons in specialized areas in the drugs and both demand and supply. And these are some of the programs to support sensitization in the community. Many people remember Eva Goes to Foreign, not just as a poster, but also as an animation, which talks about what are some of the consequences of trafficking drugs to other countries, especially for persons who swallow drugs and the risk that it represents. And Eva was a very popular public education program. And we suspect that as we go into this post-COVID era, that things like the trafficking of drugs using couriers who swallow drugs, and we change the language. We don't talk about drug mules and those kinds of things. We talk about couriers, persons who are drug couriers, who are swallowers, who take drugs out of this country and into other countries, and who bring drugs in as well. The drug treatment court I mentioned earlier, this is an initiative that works in the community to help keep people in the community while they attain sobriety for their substance use. And then, of course, one of my favorite programs that is coordinated and run through the National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program, which is the Trinity SMART program. The Trinity SMART program targets young children as early as preschool to understand what substances are and how to stay away from them. So it's to make smart choices. S is to stay away from tobacco, alcohol, energy drinks is something we don't talk about a lot, but energy drinks and all other drugs. The M teaches them to make smart choices. What should you take? What kinds of food should you eat? What is nutritious and what is not? A is to ask for help. If something is wrong, you ask for help, both to your teachers, your parents, to whomever, a responsible adult. R is to run away from drugs. We don't want them running to it, we want them running away from it, but we want them running away from it with accurate information, okay? And then T is to talk to your teachers and parents about everything, because sometimes it's the silence that gives birth to the negative behaviors that we see that sometimes lead to substance use. So I will end here, again, making the pitch for supporting the NCPP through prevention. And these are some of the programs that we would love to see more of in the community. And I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Michelle Nasir, whom I love presenting with because she's just so knowledgeable. And every time I present with her, I learn something new. Right?
I try not to disappoint you.
Good. I know you won't. I don't have to worry about that.
So thank you very much, Esther, for the nice introduction, and thank you to NCPP for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic of trending drugs of use and misuse that we have seen at the Forensic Science Center. It's not my intention to scare anyone or make any undue alarm occur. I'm just trying to sensitize the listening audience to what we're actually seeing, the new drugs in particular that we are seeing being seized in the communities, and then we want to ensure that you're making wise decisions, staying safe, using the drugs that do have medical uses wisely, and then being informed of the risks in the event that you have non-medical use of drugs, all right? Now, forensic is typically known in the public for doing autopsies, and that's our every Monday morning being flashed on the television and the news. We do lots of autopsies, yes, but we don't only do autopsies. There's an entire forensic science subdivision comprising 5 laboratories: biology, chemistry. Biology does DNA analysis. Chemistry will do all the seized drugs that are brought off the streets, to name a few, as well as trace evidence. The documents persons, they will do forgery, both money, counterfeit currency and handwriting analysis. The toxicology unit tests for drugs, alcohol, poisons in the body fluids. And finally, the firearms section that would look at firearms and ammunition submitted from crime scenes, all right? So before I get into the real cases that you're going to see, of course, I can't go into specifics because they're real cases. I just want us to start on the same page. So I want to define 2 things in particular. The first is you're going to hear me talk a little bit about new psychoactive substances. I'm going to shorten it and use the acronym NPS. These are drugs that are designed to replicate the effects of illegal substances like the normal marijuana and cocaine, ecstasy to some extent. And then, so that's NPS drugs. And then dangerous drugs. When I say dangerous drugs, I mean any drug that is listed in our Dangerous Drug Act is found in either the first schedule or the second schedule of the Dangerous Drug Act. All right? So when I say something is dangerous, it means that our government has seen it fit to put it on either the first or second schedule to protect the population against its harmful effects. So Esther mentioned the work of the UNODCP and their donation of handheld field testing devices. This is what it looks like. It allows us to go on the field and test the drugs through the packaging. You'll notice that on the left-hand side, the device is called the Raman device. It's analyzing the sample through the plastic Ziploc bag. It can then give you a preliminary result on the screen and tell you what type of drug it is. But in forensic, because we have to be so super sure about everything that we're reporting, we have to do 2 tests. We have to do a preliminary test, which is usually just a quick screen, and then we must confirm on the more sophisticated machines. So This first machine, the Raman handheld field device donated to us by the UNODC, is a non-destructive way of us testing samples in the field, and will protect the first responders when we do start seeing the drugs that are very super toxic. There's actually a word called super toxic, yes. Those drugs, just the dust is sufficient to give you an overdose. So we confirm, I know there are a lot of people out there who may look at the crime shows on television, they're popular. I don't want to call the names out, but it's very popular in recent times. So the GCMS, and I'm going to try not to use too many technical terms so I don't lose you, but the GCMS is one of the instruments that we would use. It will first separate the compound, separate the sample, and after it separates, then it identifies it for us using the libraries that we have on the instrument. So what we're seeing here is first one of the tablets that I'm going to show you later. Tablet was analyzed on the GCMS. We picked up about 3 or 4 different compounds in one tablet. One of the compounds identified as MDMA, which is the chemical name for ecstasy. Ecstasy is the street name. The chemical name is, the acronym is MDMA. So if you hear me say MDMA, I'm actually referring to ecstasy, all right? And then our library will match the spectrum to the library and will conclusively identify for us that it is ecstasy, all right? So with that in mind, what are we seeing? We always see cocaine and marijuana. We could close our eyes and test that. It's our bread and butter, we see it all the time. But what has really alarmed us is the prevalence of this new drug in our market called ecstasy. Typically, it's used in streets, in parties. It gives you a nice warm fuzzy feeling. And the typical dose,
Don't say it like
the typical dose is between 75 to 100 milligrams. It has no medical use. Ecstasy has no medical use. It is a stimulant in the same class as cocaine, so it will increase your heart rate. That's why I say it gives you a nice warm fuzzy feeling, because it increases your body temperature and gives you a feeling of euphoria. So you're always in a happy state when you're in an ecstasy, okay? Side effect of that is, traditionally it was 75 to 100 milligrams. Now it's 200 and 300 milligrams. The problem with that is that because it's giving you this nice warm fuzzy feeling, you have a tendency to overdose on ecstasy. So what you're seeing are these tablets that we have seen at the Forensic Science Center between the period 2018, November 2018 to present day 2020. All of these are real tablets seized by customs and police and different agencies of national security. I must say, we've been working a lot closer with our fellow national security agencies to bring about these evidence that I'm showing you here now. So these are tablets that have been seized over this period, at least 30 different types. And you'll notice that there are logos on the tablets, and they will appeal to different persons. So there are those that, such as Heineken, there's cartoon characters, there are those that have cars, such as Tesla. So we've seen 30 different types over the 2-year period. The one I want to particularly bring to your attention is the Zessa. On this screen, the Zessa is the.
No, I can find it. Wait, I can find it.
Okay, so the Zessa pill is the blue. There's a green pill on the second column, or second row rather. That's a Donald Trump tablet. Next to it is a tablet of a man with the glasses on. It's a blue pill. That's his Zessa pill. All right. And then there are 2 other pills in on this screen that are over 300 milligrams of ecstasy. As a result, they've been linked to deaths in other countries. We have not seen or confirmed any death in Trinidad and Tobago as a result of taking ecstasy tablets. And now I'm having a little technical problem. So while they sort me out, notice that there are tablets with money symbols on them. There are tablets that have the face of the North Korean Prime Minister or Donald Trump. There are tablets that have Pablo Escobar on them. Yes, there's a cream Pablo Escobar tablet there. But then there are also cartoon characters like SpongeBob and the Minions and John Paul and so on. Yeah? So I've been sorted out, thank you. So we've seen 30 different types of ecstasy tablets. But I haven't told you about the amounts of these ecstasy tablets that we have seen. And it's because of how much tablets we saw that the Minister of National Security had to issue a warning to our fellow citizens during Carnival because of how many we saw coming in at that time. So in this particular picture, you're seeing close to 4,900 tablets of all confirmed to be ecstasy tablets. So we realized the prevalence of ecstasy, use of ecstasy had certainly increased. This was new information to us. And this particular tablet was one of the strong ecstasy tablets, way above the usual dose. As a result, we realized that we had to provide evidence to the policymakers, such as Esther, and to the minister, that these drugs were becoming readily available. They were being purchased over the internet. They were coming into our country through the mail and other ports of entry. And they were being confiscated by customs and TTPS officers. But that was not, we were not only seeing pills. The Forensic Science Center was also being inundated with pellets of ecstasy tablets, powders, as well as crystals. So it had gone from a small public health problem, as far as we could tell, to a national problem. And this prompted us to have to inform the policymakers to change the legislation. I wanted to show you from off the internet the 3 tablets that we definitely want to be wary of using for any purpose. Remember that ecstasy has no medical use. These 3 tablets, the green Heineken, the blue Pharaoh, and the blue Punisher, all 3 have been linked to deaths abroad. Because of how strong they are, these are all among young partygoers, 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, that took the tablet and subsequently collapsed in the party and died. The legislation in Trinidad and Tobago, the Dangerous Drug Act, was changed on the 8th of November 2019, so pretty recently. It was changed, and I'm putting it up so that it's not Michelle that's saying, it is the law of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The second schedule of the Dangerous Drug Act was amended to include MDMA, that's it at the bottom of the screen, which is, as I told you already, ecstasy. In addition to amending the law to include ecstasy, we now try to capture all the new psychoactive substances that are out there to keep in line with our obligations as signatories to the United Nations. So, what does the law say? The amended act is called Act number 24 of 2019. Look it up for yourselves, please. But I tried to grab out of it, if you are found with 5 grams, so 5 grams of the powder or crystal, or 20 tablets of ecstasy, if you're found with 5 grams or 20 tablets of ecstasy, you will be charged for possession of a dangerous drug. Because ecstasy, as I mentioned before, the dangerous drug is anything listed in Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 of the Dangerous Drug Act. 5 grams or 20 tablets, you'll be charged for possession. More than 20 tablets, you'll be charged for trafficking in a dangerous drug. The act was also amended to include LSD and ketamine, because we started seeing these drugs also being used recreationally. No medical use for ecstasy, no medical use for LSD. Ketamine does have a medical use. It is used under strict hospital and medical supervision to induce anesthesia. So we started tracking the tablets. We've seen the 30 different types that I showed you. Every year, the UK look at the tablets that are making the round of the parties, and they test them and rank them as part of their harm reduction strategy. So they adopted the one other model. Instead of preventing, they use harm reduction, and they let partygoers know, hey, these tablets are pretty strong, be very careful how you use them, don't use all at once, use half, use a quarter, and so on. So then it's the top 10 based upon strength. You'll notice I put blue stars next to the ones that we have seen in Trinidad already. We have the top 2, the purple Donald Trump and the yellow Technogen. Top 2 are in Trinidad in our markets already, with over 300 milligrams of ecstasy. The others are in the top 10, so we are 6 for 10 right now. Why we are trying to alert you to the effects of the ecstasy tablets? These tablets are being produced under non-ideal conditions, is the phrase I'm going to use. So there's very minimal quality control, and you really don't know what may be present in the tablets. So you may buy a tablet now thinking it's ecstasy, but as is the case for the next 2 I'm going to show you, there was no ecstasy, no MDMA in the tablets. When we first got the tablet, it looks like a Superman crest on the tablet. It first came up as a hit to caffeine. So the tablet has a large percentage of caffeine in the tablet. But we said there's no way they could be just selling caffeine tablets alone. So we put the tablet on the more sophisticated machine, the GCMS, and we got a hit to the substance called 3,4-MDPV. On the screen, it's the little peak at 20.577 minutes. This is a synthetic catenone. It's also called a bath salt. It is not MDMA. It is the first time we have seen it in the drug population in Trinidad. So this is an NPS. It's going to mimic the effect of the ecstasy. Usually they would put this in the tablet when they can't get MDMA. Also,
so is it cheaper and more readily available? Is that why?
It's only used, usually it's only used when the ecstasy becomes unavailable. They would put the MDPV or the bath salts in the tablets to give you the same high, but it's not as smooth. So there's a high and then there's a low, it crashes, right? With the MDPV, with the bath salt, the crash is more severe. The withdrawal is more severe. The other tablet that we got, this tablet was in someone's home. It was a raid done by the police. They brought it in us for us to test. This one also surprised us pretty much because we detected methamphetamine in a tablet in Trinidad. Very first time we have seen methamphetamine in our drug use population. Methamphetamine, like cocaine, is a stimulant, but it is 10 times the addictive power of cocaine, 10 times. So again, we had to alert the ESTA and the wider public, blast the news out. Essentially, we're no longer seeing just cocaine and marijuana. That's the be all of it. Just like Europe, we're now starting to see amphetamine type stimulants in the drug market in Trinidad. As a result of the change to the law in 2019, November, it is now illegal to have these substances in Trinidad. Before it was not in our law. Now if you are held with any of these substances, you're either going to be charged for possession of a dangerous drug or trafficking in a dangerous drug. We find the consequence of which is either going to be a fine and or imprisonment. As I touched on marijuana edibles before, I just want to, particularly the parents, to see what it is the young persons are being exposed to, because it is happening among the younger folks. Most of the older marijuana users, they stick to the cigarettes. They stick to smoking. They don't eat the herb, as they say. But the younger ones are experimenting, and they are the ones who are going to challenge us the most, I think. Over the years, 2017, 2018, 2019, we would see only 10 cases maybe where they brought in an edible marijuana. Usually it was brownies, yeah? Now, in this year, last year and this year, we have become creative. We are using our creativity in many ways, and that's just showed already. We have lollipops and you had the oils and so on. We're seeing candies, cookies, cupcakes, brownies, you name it, we're trying it. Even in a punch, we got a punch the other day. Someone made a punch and was selling punch with marijuana in it, if you think that's possible.
Very possible.
It's very possible. So these edible marijuana samples, they're super dangerous because marijuana is one of the few drugs that is fat soluble. Most drugs are water soluble. Marijuana is fat soluble. As a result, it can penetrate through the cell membranes there's no barrier, essentially. There's no barrier. So when you're smoking a marijuana, before you're finished smoking the marijuana, you're already high. Because it has gone through your system, penetrated all your cells, come to your brain, and you get the high immediately. Within half hour of smoking a marijuana joint, you are high. But the edibles, however, as Esther touched on, you're gonna eat it, your body's gonna digest it, and you're going to get the dose all at once. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because the dose is so high, you get a psychotic event. And we've had instances, you're gonna see, and I'm gonna tell you about it, where persons have been rolling around with no clothes on, hearing voices, speaking in tongues, confessing to crimes they have not committed, and so on. And there's no way that they can be treated. The THC is so high in their system that they're hallucinating. These drugs, our law was modified to decriminalize marijuana. We did not legalize marijuana. I want to stress that point. Marijuana was decriminalized for medicinal use. You have to have a medical condition to use marijuana, in other words. Our law did not change. You cannot sell marijuana in schools or within 500 meters of a school compound. Any school compound, university, college, tertiary education. What am I telling you? Back in 2017, when we were seeing the brownies for the first time, we were actually finding fragments of marijuana leaves and stems mixed in the brownies. So you could break up the brownie and separate it into all its little crumbs, and you'll actually find pieces of marijuana leaf or stem or seeds. Fast forward to 2017, however, to 2019, however, April 2019, cupcakes were brought in, seeds in a school. The young man consumed a piece at lunchtime, started acting strange, went home and jumped through his bedroom window and broke his hands. All because of the effect of the marijuana brownie. When we analyzed the marijuana brownie, we found no leaves, no stems, no seeds. Yet we detected THC in the marijuana. So clearly, we're now using the THC oil, as you pointed out in one of your slides. They're using the THC oil to bake the brownies and produce this high. Very, very dangerous. More examples of edible marijuana samples, cupcakes, gummy bears, and so on. And we tried to highlight that you're actually seeing puncture marks in the gummy bears where they inserted, where they pierced the gummy bear with the marijuana sample. These are all from island parties that are targeted to younger age groups. The colorful candies and so on are attractive to younger people, and they'll have a tendency now to have more of it. Others were seized from schools and brought into the forensic science center to test for the presence of the marijuana. In addition to marijuana edibles, we're seeing marijuana apparatus. And by apparatus, I mean anything that you're using to help you get the marijuana to get the THC out of the marijuana plant. We have vape cartridges and we have marijuana apparatus. We're showing you an example of one that was submitted, the Kingpen, but you're also seeing apparatus, things that they use, they call them hookahs. Look it up, and they put the marijuana inside of these apparatus. They generate steam, they cook it, and they inhale all of it. Again, they're getting one big rush of marijuana, of THC. And the THC is the only part of the marijuana plant that is psychoactive. It's going to give you the high. There are many other cannabinoids in marijuana, but only THC gives you the high. More apparatus. And the things that are being sold, they look like small jars, probably like big tins with names like Tangy and Supreme Cartel. Tangy is actually a brand of marijuana with a citrus flavor, a tangerine flavor. Hence the reason it's called Tangy. I'm showing you these pictures and these exhibits, real exhibits, because when they were submitted to us to test at the center, we did not detect any nicotine in these samples, which was very surprising. What we did in fact detect was something called dronabinol. Dronabinol is a trade name for a specific type of THC. We all know THC is the active ingredient, psychoactive ingredient in the cannabis plant. Dronabinol is a specific form of the THC. It's a negative THC, and it does have medical use. It is approved by the FDA. It can prevent you from getting nausea and vomiting for persons who are going through chemotherapy. It can also increase your appetite for persons who are suffering from the effects of AIDS and so on. So it does have a medical use, but it's a specific form of the THC that has to be distilled out of the plant. So trying to use the plant to get that specific form is impossible because you're going to get all the other bad ones. Yeah? So know when you're buying your products for vape to vape that you may think you're not using a dangerous drug and you think you may be using nicotine, but in fact we are finding that it has no nicotine in these samples. They do contain dronabinol, which is a specific form of THC from the cannabis sativa plant. So I know we are going to be bombarded with lots of questions, so I'm going to stop here and leave the floor open to the listening public to try and answer any questions that you may have with regard to the use and misuse of drugs that we are seeing in our population and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And we do have quite a few questions actually. One question is, do you do your workshops in schools? And the answer to that is yes, we do go to both primary and the secondary schools. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the preschool program that NADAP usually does that is now being offered again. However, in the post-COVID environment, we anticipate that more of it will be done virtually because we don't anticipate that anybody is letting anybody come into their schools anytime soon, with all of the structure that the Ministry of Health has put on it. Are the detection devices available for use by the members of the TTPS or only specialized officers?
The detection devices, your handheld detection devices, are available to multiple agencies in national security, not only the Forensic Science Center, so that we are well equipped to be in the field and detect the presence of the drugs, because it is designed to protect the first responders who come in contact with the drugs. So multiple arms of national security do have that device as well.
So it's the TTPS, it's the
TTPS, Coast Guard, Customs,
Forensic. And Forensic.
Yes.
Customs is not an arm of national security; they're actually Ministry of Finance.
I stand corrected.
But they work like they work with us.
Yes,
so,
they do.
How much time would you get if you are charged for possession of ecstasy? I don't recall.
It's up to the discretion of the magistrate how much time you will get, because possession is only 5 grams and less or 20 tablets and less. It will be up to the discretion of the magistrate.
But possession for the purpose of trafficking,
no,
which is in excess of that amount.
Yes.
Right.
So if you, I don't want to mix up the term possession and trafficking.
Okay.
So if you are found with more than 20 tablets, you'll be charged for trafficking in a dangerous drug, and that fine is more and the jail term is longer than simple possession.
What can you do if a child consumes edibles accidentally?
This actually happened a few weeks ago. An entire family had to be admitted to hospital. I think it was a birthday cake or some cake that was brought to the home. Everyone consumed it, father, mother, child. Everyone had to be rushed to hospital. Marijuana being consumed, I mentioned you're going to get one big dose of the THC being flooded into your system, and you're going to have a psychotic event. There's nothing you can do to reverse the effects. You just have to wait for the effects to wear off.
So the other thing about the edibles, and again we want to talk to parents on this, we had learned anecdotally that some some parents were ordering things like brownies and cookies for limes when their children had limes. So you really want to be speaking to your children about when they go to these limes to ask a couple questions about what exactly are they being offered. I was at with my niece and she offered me a brownie and I said, what kind of brownie is it? And she said, don't worry, Auntie Esther, it's not a happy brownie.
They call it happy
So
brownie,
it's a happy,
yes.
so those
Yes.
kinds of things you want to be on the lookout for.
Yes.
Is it easy to overdose on the edibles due to delayed impact time? I think Michelle just spoke to
Exactly
that
right.
and I mentioned it as well. And what can be done in a case like this? Transport the person to the hospital,
That's right.
have them monitored and managed at the emergency room.
There's so many instances, so many stories
Yeah.
of persons consuming the edibles.
Edibles, yeah.
It doesn't have to be food, it could be drink as well. As I mentioned, we got a case where it was a punch that the person drank. Everybody's also susceptible, have different susceptibilities. So you might feel the effect more than I might. A male might feel the effect differently to a female, all right? Again, remembering that marijuana is a fat-soluble substance, right? So the older folks knew, but they didn't know, it just so happened. You're smoking a joint of marijuana, that's a dose. You can only pack so much of the plant into the cigarette. Yeah. So every puff that you make, you got a small dose of it. Using edibles, you get all at once, and so much of it. Imagine you're gonna just have one brownie, or you're gonna have two brownies. It's so much of it. You automatically have a hallucinating episode.
What are some ways to build self-esteem in teenagers who seek to fit in by using drugs?
I'm gonna leave that to you.
We have over and over, we have said to parents, talk to your children, listen to them, not just listen with the intent of responding, but truly listen to them. Because sometimes our young people are crying out for help and we're not listening. We're labeling, we're judging, and we are not listening. You start building that self-esteem earlier than the teenage years. You start building it from the time they're little. So, but by the time they get to the teenage years, and we understand that the physiology of a teenager is very different, because they are growing at such a rate that their whole body is changing. And you have to be able to address self-esteem on a number of levels. What is making the role of parenting even more difficult now is the social media, because you have so much bullying and so many other things that happen on social media that have the potential to damage your child's self-esteem. So I would say start with listening. Start with also make sure you know your children's friends. Some parents don't want to get in their children's business. Get in their business, because that's the only way you will really know what is going on. So this whole thing about too much privacy, how they need all their privacy, no, they don't need all that privacy. You need to be listening on phone calls. You need to be able to check that phone and see what's happening. Maybe it might come across as a lack of trust, but you know what? If you do it and your child understands that you're doing it with the best intention, they may push back, but you will have some sense of what is happening. Limit social media exposure, because that can be really detrimental to your child. The whole cyberbullying piece of it. So you have to look at, and you have to know your child. If they don't know them after COVID, maybe you'll ever know them again. But get to know your children. But you want to understand them.
It's cool to not use drugs, just as it's perceived to be cool to use it. It's also cool to not use it, because I beg your pardon, I'm showing my age. But my point is that your parents are not going to be there all the time. They can't monitor you 24/7. So sometimes you have to make a decision on your own that you're not going to use drugs, even if your peers are using it, even if everybody is doing it, because you have made the decision. It's your body, and you're developing, and this is when your brain is supposedly developing. It's going to impact your ability to retain and learn new things. Whoever have exams to do, it's not going to help you to study. It's actually going to take away from it. It's actually the ecstasy was, some of the ecstasy tablets that we saw were being used by university students to stay awake so that they could study. That might work, but for how long? Because as you get into as you pass your exams and you get into the working world, and the pressures do start to mount and you have deadlines to make, you're not going to be able to turn to ecstasy. You're not going to be able to do an all-nighter and take a tablet and stay up all night. So you have to make a decision from the start not to put your body through the abuse and misuse of ecstasy or other dangerous drugs. I'm still learning not to use the word abuse.
Abuse, yes. The drugs aren't abused. Do you agree with the new arrangements the government has in place for marijuana use and possession? And I think in the first part of my presentation, I did look at the relevance of drug policy and spoke to the fact that it would significantly reduce the number of persons. These new arrangements significantly reduces the number of persons who will be arrested, who would attract a criminal record, those kinds of things. And so, to the extent that there are positives that redound from these policies, we are in support of the policy on that basis. So yes, so there are definite benefits to be derived from the new arrangements with the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act. And I think that is our last question. We want to thank you for joining us and to let you know that the next session is entitled Crime Prevention Post-Disasters, which will be held on Tuesday, the 28th of July from 6 to 7 p.m. and it will feature the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, the ODPM as it is popularly known by its acronym. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, the listening audience.
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you taking the information that you've received today, because we're not just here to sit down and talk. We're here to provide you with information that you can take, that you can use, and that will be beneficial to you as in the community. So thank you, NCPP, for the opportunity,
yes,
and we look forward to working with you in the future. Have a blessed night, everybody. Do take care, be aware of the weather out there, and take the necessary precautions.
And be safe.
And be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.